are you doing, you impudent controller? I said jump! 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 Holman, I need a new controller. This one has failed me yet again.
Right. Yes. Failed you again. Hang on. Let me check the box. Listen, we're out of controllers for that system. Try a different one, and I'll get more for both later. Okay?
Bite my shiny metal.
Ish, you know this is a family-friendly show, unlike your gaming.
Who designs these controllers in design?
As we mentioned all the way back in episode 5 of the Chronicles of Geek, the playing of games is one of humanity's original forms of escape. We know from the historical records that gaming has been around since the Stone Age, with each age following adding its own spin of technology to gaming, helping us evolve as a species. The modern world is no exception. Think about it. What was your first gaming system? How far back can your gaming glory go? For me, the geek of the North, it was the granddaddy, the Atari 2600 with original wood grain sticker, not the fancy sci-fi looking one. My childhood saw hours of gaming titles like Combat, Yar's Revenge, Cubert, Midnight Magic, Defender, and yes, even E.T. And if I could go way back and stop myself from throwing that game in the fire, I'm not sure I would, regardless how much it's worth now. If you ever tried to play it, you understand. Video gaming has been the rallying cry for the modern geek since the 70s. A place where we could play games solo, but do it in groups, competitively, cooperatively, and sometimes we're not even in the same game. We're just in the same room, escaping together. Gaming, video gaming, gives us the ability to become the hero, the master, to become who we dream to be, who we idolize, who we fantasize about being. Superheroes, sports stars, the smartest person in the world, a really fast little green dinosaur. In video games, we can be any and all of them. Trust me, I know. In some worlds they call me Lord. In others, that bugger who put a freeway through a lake. Welcome to the Chronicles of Geek, my friends. Sit back and join Ish and myself, Damon Roth, as this week we escape into the world of video games.
Which one of these systems are you going to talk about? There are so many, even I am confused.
That, Ish, is a very good point. There are a lot of video game systems, not to mention the games that go with them. From consoles to PC to phones to dedicated boxes, video games span a wide range of devices. Now, for one to fully digest what modern video gaming is, one would need probably multiple series, not just one, let alone a single episode. So for the sake of time and consistency, when I refer to video gaming, I am including everything back to Pong and then forward. And yes, we're going to include all the early gaming machines that the University of Geeks were creating back in the 40s and 50s and 60s on oscilloscopes and whatever else they could get their hands on. The technology, however, has come a long way since Pong. A long way. But the idea, the main purpose of why we game is the same. Now, you may have noticed I said main purpose. Why I said this is that I want to recognize that gaming has many practical applications, from education to rehabilitation, for example. Escaping, however, is still the main reason why we game. Modern video gaming, of course, has its roots running all the way back to the pinball halls and early games of chance. As we look back at video games, though, we're just going to stop at the 80s, where arcades were in their glory days and gaming geeks plugged quarters into machines at a very alarming rate. So much so that the dark underbelly of escapism, this time through video games, was exposed as it became apparent that many could become addicted to the escape after falling down the rabbit hole. I am sure many of you have had warnings from parents, teachers, or others that video games can become an obsession. In fact, I am going to bet that many of you, myself included, may have had to call into work after a gaming session went a wee little bit too long with a very bad case of the gaming flu. Now, for those of you that are saying, I have never had a case of video game flu in my life, I ask you this. Have you ever had a case of, say, jam flu? You know, where the jam session that was supposed to end at 10 went to the wee hours of the morning? Because sometimes you just can't stop making music. And sometimes you just can't stop saving the world. As mentioned before, escaping is escaping regardless of how you do it. Jamming in a band, knitting, running marathons, reading one book in a day. Escaping is escaping, and video gaming is no exception. What you may have to remember though is to set an alarm and never depend on game time.
Welcome to the Geek News Flashback, where we are in 1973 at the laboratories of Xerox Incorporated. Xerox, of course, made its claim to fame with the advent of its business tools, including the photocopier. So ubiquitous that for many years, photocopying, regardless of brand of machine, was referred to as Xeroxing. However, we are at the labs of Xerox not for photocopying, but for a little invention that would change the world of computing forever. This device would be the gateway for a usable graphical user interface and for interactive gaming as we know it. What is ironic about this invention refined by Xerox is that the company literally gave it away to Apple Computers Incorporated. Engineers working on the Alto project were forced to present their creation to the design team from Apple. Yes, the device we are talking about is the most common computing device after the keyboard, the mouse. This device, which has become as common as well a field mouse, was almost thrown into the trash bin of history. Executives with Xerox, suffering from a corporate blind spot, were unable to see the future applications of the Alto system and were falling to the same fate as IBM, using logic that dictated who would ever want a personal computer. It was the Apple Corporation, under the guidance of the two Steves, Wozniak and Jobs, who were able to secure unlimited patent use of this mouse technology for was basically a pittance of royalties. This coup would allow Apple to take computing to a realm that many only thought possible in science fiction, as it was the breakthrough for Apple's next generation computing platform, the Macintosh.
Computer? Computer. Hello, computer.
Just use the keyboard.
The keyboard. How quaint.
From there, we know the rest is history, as even its major competitor, Microsoft, was forced to jump on the mouse bandwagon if it ever wanted its GUI Windows to work as well. From humble beginnings, the mouse has risen to greatness, changing the course of computing history along the way. This has been your Geek News Flashback. Today's Geek News Flashback has been brought to you by Ripped Apparel. Use the promo code GNN10 for all your finer geek apparel needs. And don't forget to subscribe and like below to keep up on all your fan-fueled content.
Okay, so first, Adrian, thank you very much for joining us here on the Chronicles of Geek.
You're very welcome.
Can you explain from a store owner's point of view what escaping through video games means to you?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm going to have to say for my customers that come through the door, They're looking for something that takes the stress away of daily life, so they can relax and go into sort of a fantasy world. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And all customers have a different idea of what that looks like. I have to say that the majority of customers are looking to relieve their stress through war games, or I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So Skyrim is a big game that's a whole world of dragons and knights and sorcerers and what have you. So they just like to create their own character and their own avatar. That's really what it's called. And put that into the video game, and then try to play the video game as their own personality. So they would do things that they would think that would be good to do in real life in the video game.
What, for you, is the most popular game system to sell? Like for the cartridges themselves?
Well, I have to say it's a mix, but I would have to say most people come in for PS4 and then Nintendo. Nintendo is very big because it goes from roughly 1991, the NES came out, and all the way up to now. And there's been many different consoles that have come out in that time frame for Nintendo. So it's very collectible and very sought after. And I get lots of collectors coming in.
What is your favorite system of all time, and what was your first system?
My very first system was a Nintendo system, the first one that came out. But my favorite one was Super Nintendo. Easy to play. The graphics were decent. It was a lot of fun, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I could spend hours on there after dinner, right before bed when I was a kid, and just keep playing.
All right, favorite game for Super Nintendo?
I have to say that would probably be Earthbound. It was different. It was a good storyline, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
Now, of course, in gaming, there's the console games and there's the PC games.
Yes.
What do you feel the main difference for the end user, for the fan, the person actually playing the games? What do you think the difference between the two is, the two experiences?
I think the PC is more for the hardcore gamer on the technical side, whereas the consoles are more geared towards the average gamer, or the gamer that's just beginning or just wants to play once in a while for fun. Where the PC, I find, is that they're very committed. They can spend 6 to 8 hours a day on there at times, and just a very committed gaming person.
As the whole statement said, I broke a controller today. Is that a common thing for you to hear?
Yes, it is. Frustration level can go through the roof, especially when you're trying to fight a boss. That's extremely difficult. There's a lot of games out there that are hard. I can think of off the top of my head, probably one would be Cuphead. Really hard.
And I noticed on your wall you attend Comic-Cons.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, your experiences?
All right, so we have done Calgary, we've gone to Saskatoon, we've done Vancouver, and obviously Victoria. I have to say that probably Calgary was the best experience, but they're still all good. Calgary being the largest one that we participated in. I would have to say that 2000, probably, I think it was 15 or maybe 16, was the absolute best. It was crazy busy. Lots of celebrities, lots of people in cosplay, and really enjoyed the cosplay parade downtown Calgary. The mayor was involved. I can't remember his name, but... Nenshi, that's correct, yes. And there must have been probably at least 700 plus people that were actually participating in the parade, all in their cosplay.
So a customer just came into the store and he brought a bunch of old games. What's up with that?
All right. So what customer brings in some old games. So normally what they do is they trade the old games to pick out some other games. And what I do is I'll give store credit towards their next purchase.
Oh, so you get to bring the old stuff and get different stuff.
That's correct.
I like it. Yes. Ever had a copy of ET?
I've had a couple of copies of ET. One sat there for about a year collecting dust. And I think ended up selling it for $5. But there is a story behind that, obviously. It was on, I think, Netflix as well. And the game was so bad that people were returning them left, right, and center. And back in those days, you could return games even if you'd used them to get a refund. Stores didn't know what to do with all of the return games. So they ended up taking them to the dump. And apparently, I believe the story goes, they were transported to New Mexico and buried somewhere in a garbage dump. And there was tens of thousands of cartridges for ET that were buried. And I think it was in 2017, I'm not sure of the date or the year, but in that time frame, that they dug them up and found them. And there was literally tens of thousands of carts that were still there.
So you're moving, so that means you've obviously survived COVID.
Yes.
What was your little business secret to do it? What did you do that you think got you through it?
Online sales and the delivery service. Those were the two main factors. We stayed open during COVID with a limited amount of people being allowed in the store. We took precautions. We reduced our hours, but online sales took off like a rocket. We do shipping all across North America, and that helped us survive a great deal. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
All right,
That is
thank
awesome.
you.
Holman?
The controllers have been ordered-ish. They just take a while.
No, Holman, not that. I am trying this new game. It was just released, but something is wrong.
This Geek Gripe of the Week is definitely one that is shared by many individuals around the globe. And no, it is not a new gripe, as it has been around on many forums for many years. As mentioned in the GNN Grace page, many of us geeks are incredibly tired of forking over our hard-earned coins for the promise of an escape of a video game only to have it need hours to download content so it's playable. So buggy and glitchy that it begins to seem that perhaps ET was not that bad of a game after all. At least it would load. Or the pinnacle of gaming gripes, pay to play after you have already paid to play. And personally for this geek, this last one is the one that irks me the most. Now, why is it this way? Well, we could go down and blame the capitalism hole, or we could blame designers that dream way bigger than budgets would ever allow. In fact, there are committees where ideas are chased around, changed, altered, and emerged not looking like anything that was originally discussed. So we can blame them too. Now, let's go all the way back to the release of the before-mentioned ET. And if you're not familiar with this piece of gaming history, look it up. It basically shows you exactly how everything can go wrong. When impossible release dates are meeting impossible dreams, things just don't work. However, I want to suggest that there is one more group of individuals that are just as much to blame for the modern day failures of video games as every other group. Designers, owners, publishers, doesn't matter. And it's simply us, the fans, the consumers of the games. You see, up until recently, we have allowed the industry to get away with it. We have not held them accountable. Generally, us gamers will sit quietly by our machines waiting for the latest game, hoping that this time it will deliver on the dreams. We wait for the next classic, the next game that will change everything. So in my opinion, gamers, it's time to unite properly. It's time to not be the gripe of the week and to simply demand better. Use your wallets, use your comments, use the power of the geek. This has been your Geek Gripe of the Week, brought to you by MetallicDiceGames.com. If you're about to go down the rabbit hole and need the gaming tools to get you there, use the promo code GNN for 10% off all your gaming needs.
That's it. I give up. I need a new controller.
Why don't you just read a little?
Yes. Yes, I like that idea. Where's my drink?
Surprisingly, or perhaps not surprisingly, many realms of escapism overlap. Ideas, stories, properties will span multiple forms of escape. Movies, television, comics, novels, and yes, video games. We can all think of numerous Star Wars, Star Trek, Halo, Warhammer, heck, you name the game. And sometimes in the realm of video games, there is the tie-in novel. None of the three slept well. Shell had come to Flan for one reason only, to avenge the death of her mentor. And so far, she had not even gotten to Denlor's tower. Shell hadn't planned on being sent on any mission for the town council. Taro too was anxious. When Taro checked on Anton that night, the big man voiced two words, but they were no and die. And his glazed eyes looked haunted. Taro couldn't help but think his friend was even nearer to death. And Taro's only hope for quieting his feelings of guilt and helplessness was to take the time he needed to prepare mentally and spiritually for his return to the graveyard to regain the hammer. He had not counted on being required to recover Thorn Island, but he would make the best use he could out of the town council mission. Ren, on the other hand, was actually excited about the expedition to Thorn Island. For the first time in a year, he had a clear goal in mind, an assigned goal, granted, but a goal nonetheless. And he would be among interesting companies besides. Taro awoke before dawn and spent time preparing his armor in quiet meditation, as was the custom of his faith, contemplating the righteousness of his motivations and focusing on the needs to display bravery and skill to the honor of Tyr. The ritual of his meditation was broken more than once by the memory of the screams of his brethren at the hands of the undead, the image of the vampire mocking him, the humiliation of giving up the sacred hammer of Tyr, and the nightmare of Anton's flesh sizzling at the impact of the unholy symbols from the abyss. Taro shook his head to clear it of such thoughts and said a final prayer to Tyr, thanking him for providing companionship as he sought to hone his skills until he would be ready to make his return to the stronghold of the vampire and demand the return of the hammer. This particular novel, Pool of Radiance by James Ward and Jane Cooper Hong, goes back a few revolutions around the sun for me. I had gotten a copy of the video game Pool of Radiance and was making my way through it on my trusty old 64. And don't ever talk to me about load times until you've played off floppy disk or cassette. For those of you who are familiar with Pool of Radiance, kudos. In short form, it is one of the original turn-based graphical semi-open world games ever created. Some call it the original. Oh, did I mention it's a Dungeons and Dragons property? For the time, it was hard, especially when you had no idea what to do and there was no internet to rely on to give you hints. But back in the day, we had cheat manuals. So, I did the only thing plausible for a stuck 80s gamer. I went to the bookstore and I ordered the cheat manual. Or what I thought was the cheat manual. Instead, I got the novel. And this is when I received my first lesson in video game novel tie-ins. They do not always follow the game, and they most likely aren't going to help you win anything. Now, the book Pool of Radiance itself is your typical TSR D&D property of the time. And unless you're a serious gamer or D&D fan, Forgotten Realms specifically, I'm going to suggest that you don't rush out to buy it. Now, if you come across a copy, if it's like $2 at your local thrift store, by all means, grab it. Heck, why not? Give it a whirl. Unless you're a serious D&D fan or a gamer, it's probably not going to make a lot of sense. The book, unfortunately, assumes you know a lot about the D&D world. A lot. Also, do remember that this book is from the 80s, so please no hate comments on its slightly outdated choice of words and rolls. And no, I have no idea how a skinny metal bikini can protect anyone from anything, let alone Dragonfire. However, if you're looking for a little retro gaming, do check out this game, Pool of Radiance, and all of its follow-ups all the way to the Pool of Darkness. I believe there's 4 in this particular series. A couple more scattered throughout. The Hillsfar adventure is interesting. But if you got a machine that'll play them, why not? Just remember though, they are from the 80s, so they are going to feel very retro.
I must say that all this talk about video games has really cut into my time video gaming.
Yes, Ish, that happens sometimes. Sometimes an escape will lead us down paths that we never expected. Sometimes good, and sometimes, as mentioned, escaping by gaming, video gaming, can be dangerous. Many relationships have ended because of the call of the controller. Jobs have been lost, and futures have become dark. What we need to remember, though, is like all forms of escapism, it is possible to avoid the dark if you pay a little attention to what you are doing. Time limits, games with ends, and if the game doesn't have an end, create one on your own. There are many tricks to help one successfully fall into the rabbit hole and crawl back out. As a gamer, I have heard both sides of the argument, and I have fallen down the rabbit hole a bit too far sometimes. Remember that video game flu? But we all have, whether it's in the realm of Mario or by a totally different escape, say like fishing, have lost track of time. Because we as humans need to escape. We need to get away. The video game allows us to do that immersively. Instead of just watching or reading the escape, we get to influence it, to control it, to become it. And then afterwards, sometimes, when we're done playing the game, if we're lucky, we can read about the adventures we just had. And even watch them on the big screen. And yes, sometimes gamers can become very, very possessive of their creations. Do I know that I am not an all-powerful Sith Lord or a plucky scoundrel who spends her time playing Robin Hood? Of course I do. But for the moments where I let myself escape, where I let my worries drain off of me, where I park my emotions at the door, where I take the time to recharge, acquire an achievement badge or two, and perhaps, and yes folks, this does happen, after completing the impossible quest, gaining the confidence to not only survive living in this modern world, but also the confidence to change it, one pesky jump at a time. Until next time, I'm Damon Roth, the Geek from the North, escaping with you on the Chronicles of Geek, on the Geek News Now Network. Don't forget to subscribe and like below, and always, my friends, stay safe, stay brave, and most of all, stay geeky.